What's up guys, welcome back to another episode of Zen of Story. The Karate Kid movies were a series of movies back in the late 80s and 90s that really embedded itself in pop culture. I mean, every kid I knew of loved the movies and everyone at school wanted to be the main character, Daniel LaRusso. So when the news arrived that there was a sequel series in development, I must admit initially I was a little skeptical because, well, sequels are not often known to be better than the original. But what got everyone intrigued was the fact that it was announced that the story would be told from the point of view of Daniel LaRusso's arch nemesis, from the point of view of Johnny Lawrence. And after watching the series, I can tell you that Cobra Kai is a fantastic new addition to the Karate Kid film franchise. And today we're going to be diving into Cobra Kai and specifically about how to create a compelling gray character. At the end of the first Karate Kid films, we left Johnny Lawrence as a bully who used force and violence to get what he wants, hardly any trait that we would find in a hero. And yet, even in those films, there were just enough nuggets of redemption to work with, something to make him a more redeemable character. But now, before going on, what exactly is a grey character? Well, perhaps before I say anything about the subject, it's best to hear from a modern-day master at creating grey characters. Let's hear what George R.R. Martin, the author of A Song of Ice and Fire series, has to say about creating these kind of characters.
I mean, I've often said that I believe in gray characters. I don't believe in black and white characters. I don't want to write the band of heroes on one side and the orcs on the other side. But that's not to say that all characters are equally gray.
Now, in many stories, the characters are often divided into both good guys and bad guys. I mean, that's the kind of storytelling that was always hardwired into us from an early age, because as children and in children's stories, that's the kind of formula they followed. It was very straightforward. But we realized that in life, it's not quite like that. In life, we don't fall on either side of the spectrum. We've all got both good and bad inside of us. And what matters is the choices that we make. What matters is the actions we eventually take. Our actions are what defines us. And yet even then we are a blur of both right and wrong actions. Today we do something right, tomorrow we do something less right. Today we correct the mistakes of yesterday and then tomorrow we go and make new ones. So every day is a challenge, every day is ambiguous, and every day is a struggle at becoming a better person every single day. We ourselves are not black or white in our personalities, but we're somewhere in the middle of the spectrum. We are grey characters ourselves. So a morally grey character can be just about anyone, some with a darker, deeper shade of grey and others a lighter shade. They can be someone who does the right thing through morally ambiguous methods. They can be someone fighting for the wrong side but with good intentions. Or they could be someone who has a worthwhile goal yet will not hesitate to commit wrong actions to get what they want. The ends justifies the means. Now, there's no formula for creating grey characters, but there are definitely things that make us, as the audience, really relate to these characters. And that right there is the biggest change the writers made to Johnny Lawrence as a character. Instead of typecasting him in the archetypal bully role, we instead now see things from his point of view. We see how he has suffered after the events of the first film, and we see how his life has fallen apart after losing the tournament. We see a former champion, winner of tournaments, losing at the game of life. And as a result, we, as the people watching this unfold, inevitably sympathize with his character. So we end up feeling sorry for him because we automatically want to see him get better, because we ourselves would hope to be able to pull ourselves out of a situation like that. Then we are introduced to the modern day Daniel LaRusso. Here is someone who is winning at absolutely everything. He has a wonderful family, he owns a rich car company, and he has found a way to incorporate his karate into absolutely every aspect of his business and his life. See, that's the main difference. The karate that Daniel had learned enhances every aspect of his life. Whereas for Johnny Lawrence, well, The only karate he uses is in his endless bar fights. And yet, because we are shown Daniel through Johnny's eyes, and because we have already started to sympathize with Johnny, we as the audience are suddenly confused. Who do we root for? By reinventing the entire viewpoint of the story, all of a sudden, we as the audience are thrown off balance. Because we are forced to ask ourselves recurring questions as to who's on the right side, we ourselves have to actively participate in what the final answer is. Whose side are we on? And more importantly, why? Now, what the central question does is that it disorientates us as the audience, because we're no longer just a passive viewer observing the series. We're now forced to become an active participant in the story. So this is the power of a gray character. A gray character forces the audience to put themselves in the same shoes as this morally ambiguous, complex character, and in turn ask and answer the same questions the character has to answer. We have to decipher what is right and what is wrong. Yet the series never shows Johnny as a perfect hero. He is still very flawed, and we can see him constantly haunted and broken by the ghosts of his past. He has never moved on from his relationship with Ali. He has no direction in his life, and he gets into constant fights and drinks all day. He lives alone, estranged from his friends and his family. He is in every way a broken man, doomed to live in the literal shadow of his past self. I think this is where the showrunners really understood the difference between school life and real life. School was a time where everything felt infinite, everything felt possible, and we felt like we could go anywhere we wanted to go. And then we were thrown into the real world, and suddenly the rules that we used to use in school no longer applied to the real world, and we were forced to make decisions based on the tools we were given as children. And that's the fundamental difference between Daniel and Johnny. Both of them lack a father in their life, but both of them had father figures that played as mentors throughout their lives. Daniel LaRusso had a deeply wise and sincere teacher in Mr. Miyagi, someone who cared more for Daniel as a person than as a fighter. He placed greater importance on teaching Daniel how to win at the game of life, more than just at a karate tournament. Whereas the only mentor Johnny had was Kreese, a selfish, power-hungry bully in every form who only cared about the significance of himself and of winning. All that mattered to Kreese were trophies and the status that those trophies would bring. And so Kreese lived by the mantra of no mercy, which inevitably became the only mantra that Johnny knew throughout his life. When we were young, our teachers oftentimes became our second parents, and what they taught us would end up sticking with us for the rest of our lives. But what happens if the things that they taught us were not the things that matter? What if the things that were taught to us would not be the things that make us better people? These kind of questions once again put us as the audience in the driving seat of the story, because we have to ask ourselves the questions as to, is Johnny Lawrence the character he is because of the choices he made, or was he a victim of circumstance, exposed to the wrong lessons of life? Now, this is another recurring motif of strong, compelling gray characters. They often have this prevailing sense of misfortune after misfortune after misfortune, and it creates this sense of an almost tragic character who was merely dealt a bad hand and had to find a way to live. Now, as a side note, that's probably why we also seem to relate more to the underdog in every story. We love to see somebody rise out of nothing. Someone who had no reason to do the right thing and still goes on to do so. Because it gives us hope, it gives us a sense of redemption, it gives us a sense of anything being possible, even for us. But coming back to Johnny, he has now been stuck for far too long in his ways, and so he needs something that will radically change and challenge his beliefs and ultimately set him on a path to redemption. And that is where Miguel comes into the story. Miguel is the catalyst for Johnny Lawrence's internal journey back to becoming the best version of who he can be. And this is where the show does a great job at bringing the viewers further into the story. Because instead of taking a darker, more somber tone, the show plays off the lighter aspects of their relationship throughout the entire story, with the comical situations that both Miguel and Johnny find themselves in serving as a way for us as the viewers to further relate to both these characters. With every episode, we see more of Johnny doing the things that we would normally do as people, and we see him developing a softer, more compassionate self through his relationship with Miguel. Miguel accelerates his change. Johnny gets a second chance at being a fatherly figure through Miguel, something Miguel lacks in his own life and something Johnny threw away in his relationship with his actual son, Robbie. And through becoming the mentor of Miguel, that relationship becomes the basis for the most fundamental shift in Johnny Lawrence as a character. The only thing he knows or has derived any meaning from in his life up to this moment is Cobra Kai, the only thing that gave him a sense of significance. And so, it is only natural that he would want to restart the Cobra Kai dojo up as a second chance. Now, both of these also bring up another prevailing theme of a Grey character, and that is the theme of redemption. Redemption is something that we all have an innate desire for, and probably the reason why we always support Grey characters. But now we can't merely have a main character who is sympathetic, who is a product of misfortune, and who is the embodiment of redemption. We also need a character who has an active goal throughout the story. But as the story takes shape, he starts to develop a clear goal. In the words of the screenwriting guru John Truby,
when a character has a very specific goal, especially if it's a difficult goal to achieve, that's one of the ways the audience identifies with that character. Because if that character wants the goal that much, and I know precisely what goal they want, then I want them to win that goal too. So I get invested in it as well. When I give my story class, I talk about the desire line is the tracks of the train. And once we set up that goal at the end of the journey, it's like the audience gets on the train with the hero, and we all go after it together.
Every compelling character has a clear goal, something that we as the audience can understand and something that the story uses as an anchor point to keep returning to. Johnny wants to restart Cobra Kai and make it his own. In the same way he is outdated in many of his interests and his ways, he needs to update Cobra Kai as well. Cobra Kai is the external representation of Johnny's internal journey. It follows the same path that Johnny has to take in the story and therefore is a metaphor for the internal journey that takes place. And both change over time, as Johnny finally starts to realize that Cobra Kai was never about his own legacy, but rather about the meaning it brings to his students' lives. He finally understands why he loved being part of Cobra Kai in the first place, because it gave him a sense of community, it gave him a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, something which he now inadvertently ended up giving to his students. Johnny grows as a person, ultimately understanding that Cobra Kai was never about his own personal legacy, but for the legacy of bringing value and direction to directionless children. And so, right at the end, in the finale for Season 1, we see that he no longer seeks winning as the ultimate goal, but things beyond winning, beyond himself as the real, true goal. With every memorable character, the external journey they go on in reaching their goals will result in them ultimately facing their own deepest needs. Johnny is someone who needs to let go of the past, let go of his intense focus on his failures, and ultimately start paying deeper attention to the good things that he already has in his life. His son, his relationship with Miguel, and the value he can bring to his students by becoming the sensei that Kreese could never be for him. And he is finally able to start becoming a new person. Cobra Kai is a show we never knew we wanted. It arrived on the scene and completely subverted our expectations Karate Kid was a franchise that was starting to buckle under the stereotypes it portrayed in the 80s, and so the team behind the new series responded by reinventing the very characters and story beats that previously was receiving criticism. It is a clear example of what a story can do to adapt and update itself to modern society by literally subverting its stances on its main characters and forcing them to adapt and change to the changing needs and expectations of modern society. By doing this, it has in turn created one of the most compelling grey characters in recent times. Someone who is morally ambiguous, is suffering from his past, a product of a series of misfortunes, and has now become a sympathetic character that has found a second chance with new goals and achieves redemption by going beyond his initial moral setbacks. Johnny Lawrence enters the pantheon as one of the best grey characters created on screen. So there you have it, guys. That's part of the reason why I absolutely love this new series. If you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend you go check it out. And if you share the same passion for storytelling as much as I do subscribe for more videos below and share it with those who have the same love for the craft of storytelling as I do. And as always, thanks so much for watching. Keep exploring, keep creating, and I will catch you on the next video. Cheers.